Welcome to the Elevated Coach Podcast. I am your host, Joel Burgess, and it is my goal that with this podcast, you are fueled with all the tools, techniques, strategies, systems, and insights to become more potent and powerful in your coaching and more profitable in your business. The podcast is a mix of solo episodes and interviews with incredible coaches doing amazing things. I really hope that you enjoyed today's show, and if you do, go ahead and share it with a coach that you think would benefit from it. Let's get stuck in and sending you so much love.
We're live. So, Dan, I'm super excited for this. It's funny actually saying Dan because whenever I talk about you, I say Dan Bolton. It's like I have to talk about you with the surname, which I don't do with many people. But I'm really excited for this conversation. And we have a tradition. When I say we, I have a tradition on this podcast that the last guest asks the first question for the new guest. And it means that we don't like fluff around much and we get straight into the good stuff.
Love it.
And the last guest asked, what's your journey been like with asking for help? How do you feel about it now? And how have you got there?
Dude, I don't know if there could be a more relevant question in the world. I have been realizing, firstly, great to be here. Thanks for having me. I've noticed some really unhelpful patterns in my life where my default all of my life has been like 51-49 in relationships. But in reality, it's more like, I give a lot, which sounds really noble. But for me, the big pattern has been self-neglect. Like it's been, I'll figure myself out later. Like, let's look after other people. And that started when I was a kid. Growing up in a single parent household with my mom. My parents separated when I was 3 weeks old. And so, that's the classic story of you're 7 years old, but you feel this pressure to become the man of the house. And so it started there. And then when I was 16, I dropped out of high school, but straight away went into a role where I was like helping other people. It was a really odd experience, but I was 16 and I became the youngest sex ed presenter in New Zealand at 16, despite really not having any experience or expertise on the subject. It was more about life choices and things like that. But right away, when I was 16, my first ever job was helping other people, right? It wasn't like I'm just out here to make money. It was like, you can get paid, but the goal here is like you're going to be helping and serving these people that are just a few years younger than you. And then that evolved into me working for a church, and I was a youth pastor, and I didn't get paid very much, and it was an incredibly stressful job, and that church was fast growing, which means we were always under-resourced. But the narrative I told myself throughout all of my 20s was, this is about making a difference. This is about helping other people. And so it wasn't really about how I felt. It wasn't about whether I enjoyed it. It wasn't about whether it felt like the right fit. So much of it was just caught up in like, we're out here changing the world. And if you're a Christian and you have this narrative, it's like, we're changing the balance of eternity, right? And so it became this deeply ingrained pattern in me that what I felt or how I'm doing mattered much less than how other people were doing. And so what that then caused me to do was become unaware of my feelings. And the only times my true feelings would ever come out was when I could no longer cope with the stress or the pressure or the overwhelm. And so I would say I'm very much still trying to learn to ask for help and trying to learn to do that. And I think anyone who's listening to this podcast, they probably have some sense of the person they are is shaped by the trauma they've been through. And that trauma can have really huge benefits because it might mean that you have turned trauma into a superpower where you're amazing at helping other people. You're so thoughtful, you're so caring, you're so kind, you're always the person to be checking out on the other people. And then when people ask you how you're doing, you kind of glaze over it because who cares? You're here to change humanity and serve the world and leave an impact. And I would say I'm unlearning so much of that, not because it's not important to help people, not because it is unhelpful to put others' needs before your own, even though in a lot of cases it can be if it means self-neglect. It's really about finding that balance between how do you love other people will you actually learn to love yourself, which means you not only have to be great at giving love, you have to be amazing at receiving love. And that also means you don't just be great at giving advice, you have to be good at receiving advice and giving help and receiving help. And so I would say, like, I'm very much on the journey. And I think a lot of it for me has stemmed from this place of like asking for help and vulnerability. Not so much feels like a weakness, but feels like a distraction. If I can just work through this by focusing on other people and helping other people, then it'll eventually go away. And obviously, we know that that's not true. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't have a really good, clear, succinct answer because this is like, I've been journaling a ton. I'm in Vancouver right now, my first time here in Canada. I've had so much time to reflect and journal and things like that. And this is literally the stuff I've been reading in the last writing in the last few days, sorry, of like, oh, I really struggle with this. And I think it's created an imbalance in a lot of my friendships where I'm really used to giving, people are really used to receiving. So then if Dan needs something, there's not always reciprocity, if that makes sense. And so it's a very raw, real season that I'm in, and I'm becoming more aware of like, I need to create balance and that law of reciprocity in my relationships where there is an equal to and fro. And I do have amazing people in my life that I do have that with, but I think I've also created an unhelpful dynamic in a lot of my relationships where the default is Dan's got this covered. Dan's going to pay the bill. Dan's going to figure it all out. Dan, the guy who has got it all together. And yeah, I mean, you can take this wherever you want it to go, but this is a very like timely question because this is definitely something that I'm realizing I've struggled with massively, and I'm definitely still working through.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I feel if I reflect on that, like I'm perhaps the opposite, right? Where it's I perhaps have a tendency to lose myself in asking for help, if that makes sense. And I'm kind of going through a journey now of like actually regaining trust in myself. Like I have almost implicitly for my life like trusted others more than myself.
Right.
And I've been going through this journey recently of like, oh, like I'm giving away my power in so many situations. Another thing came up, and I'm really curious as to like where you land in this, because it feels like a massive paradox of kind of losing yourself in the service of others. And that's something I really believe in. Like losing myself in the service of others is kind of how I find myself. But like on the other side, like one of your core messages is I suppose like doing what you love and making sure it all feels like play. And to some degree, it feels like a total paradox, right? Of like, only do what you love, and then on the other side is, lose yourself in the service of others. And I know there is this sweet spot in between that, but like, can you talk to that and your experience in finding that sweet spot?
Yeah. One of the things that I deeply believe is that I'm here to help a certain group of people. And so the more I try and be someone I'm not, the more I'm probably helping a group that I'm not best served to help. And so if I can trust that within the world, the universe, there are enough guides, enough leaders, enough people who are wired in different ways, that speak different languages, that come from different cultural backgrounds, that have different passions, that if we all were to go in on our authenticity, then humanity is going to be served. The more I try and fit into a box of, oh, this is what it needs to be and this is what it needs to look like, the more I give pseudo service, where I'm not really doing a huge service to the people that I'm working with because I'm not the best version of me. They're getting this broken, wounded healer version, right? And also, I'm not looking after myself, which means ultimately it's not going to be sustainable. There's either going to be a big crash and burn event, which we've seen. And if you look at any religion, right, the people that seem to be in that, like, it's all about other people, they're the people who tend to like lose it all and it all burns to the ground because they're the ones who are burned out, not sleeping, not taking care of themselves, not looking after their marriage, whatever it might be, because it's like, I'm changing the world right now. And so I think for me, my conviction over years has become like, if I find my sweet spot and I live from my sweet spot, I will also find my people. And in finding my people, I will find the people that I'm perfectly suited and designed to serve, people that live at my frequency, people that resonate to what I believe and what I carry and the message that I feel like I have inside of me. And the best gift we could give anyone on the planet is the best version of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
the most awakened, healed, conscious, self-aware, on the journey version that we could possibly give. And so Ram Dass has this amazing quote, and it's something along the lines of, I want to find it because it's honestly been such a helpful, I've got a screenshot of it, so it'll only take me a couple of seconds. But this particular quote has been speaking to me for weeks. It says, I can do nothing for you but work on myself.
Mm-hmm.
You can do nothing for me but work on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that in there lies the paradox, which is people who are wired for service think if I just ignore what I'm feeling and simply focus on the other person, I'm going to be able to help them to the greatest extent. What I believe and what I've come to learn is the best gift I could give someone else is just looking after Dan Bolton.
Mm-hmm.
Because in every interaction that I have with people, I'm bringing my kind of quote unquote cleanest energy,
Mm-hmm.
the most beautiful and alive and loving version of myself. But when I am neglecting myself, when I'm putting myself last, I can only give of what I have. And so, you know, regardless of people's religious traditions, there's this amazing line that Jesus says where someone challenges him and says, like, how do you summarize all of the teachings of Judaism, like the Old Testament? And Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned is like, you can only love people to the extent that you love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not, these are not disconnected things.
Mm-hmm.
You might think you're doing this amazing job loving other people, and deep down you're self-loathing, you're self-neglecting, you think that finding a sweet spot isn't important. You think it's just about kind of doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
But the best gift you could give other people in loving other people is to love yourself, because then the person they're interacting with, the person they're coming across, the person that's sitting across from them on a Zoom call, at a coffee shop, you know, at the dinner table, wherever it might be, that person is alive. That person is excited. That person is aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very counterintuitive because we think the greatest way that we serve other people is we just think about them and not about us.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned it's the reverse. If you want to do it sustainably and beautifully and powerfully, you have to figure out how to look after yourself. So in the path of service, you don't lose yourself to other people, but you find more of who you are.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. It almost feels like it's trickery of the mind. Like it's like this narcissistic thought of like, just go look after yourself. But actually it's so true. And my language is, how I apply this is, in my language is like living as enrollment, where you awake people to who they could be by just who you are. And one thing I've learned from being in your space, in your mastermind, is it's like the greatest success is just being excited by your life, like fall in love with your life. And I've made that an absolute non-negotiable. And like down to the just smallest little detail, like really simple example, for example, like designing my carousels. I realized designing these carousels was just causing me friction. So I was like, well, don't do it if I don't enjoy it. Right. So now I've made it white text and black font. It's like, now I really enjoy it. Yeah. And if you need someone if you want someone who has a nice design carousel, like I'm not your guy. And I suppose it's just really like owning that. And I think it's also why we are in the greatest career in the world. It's like, go and create your dream life and just share how you got there. Like that's my content strategy. And just being in your space has given me real permission to go and do that, really.
Well, I think it's a reframe also of like, if we think about the coaching, consulting, value creator space, there is a disconnect between the reality and then what people think they're actually supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And so when I got started, I was an echo of everyone else's courses and masterminds that I'd gone through, because I thought my role was that of a teacher.
Yeah.
And I think people can have teaching gifts, but I don't think that's why people hire us as coaches and as consultants. There is this disconnect where we think if we can just say the right things and memorize the right strategy and whatever else, then we give people the gift of our mind, and we give people the gift of our memorized, structure and strategy and tactics and lines. When in actuality, the best gift we can give people is not to be a teacher, but to be a model, to show people what's possible. And so giving people a blueprint to how to be alive, right? Joseph Campbell has a great quote. It's something along the lines of, I don't think people are looking for meaning in life. I think they're looking for the experience of being fully alive. And so if you think like, what's the best gift you could give your audience or your clients? It's first and foremost, are you on the path of being fully aligned and fully alive? Are you someone who exudes passion and excitement for life? Because that's what draws people in, is that energetic attractiveness of like, well, I'm stuck and I'm frustrated right now, but this person seems to be having fun. This person seems to be alive and vibrant and excited about what they're doing, as opposed to, doesn't matter how I feel, doesn't matter who I am, I'm just going to teach the best stuff, and the person with the best teaching wins and attracts the client or changes them. And that's been the big mind shift for me around the coaching space, is going, I think the thing that attracts the right people to work with us is our essence, it's our core, it's who we are, it's our ethos. And so it's even more important that we go on the journey of the self-awareness discovery of like, okay, so who are we and how we're wired? Whether it's down to like carousels and branding. Even I was thinking about this the other day. I've found so much friction. Let's get really tactical for a second. I made most of my money through Facebook. And Facebook is so great in some ways, where it's like, you can post anything, whether it's long, whether it's short, it has a photo, it has a video, it's all text. You've got lots of like, you've got kind of unlimited variety there. And then you also don't take your posts too seriously, or at least you don't have to, because the news feed is different to Instagram. So I would post like 4 times in a day sometimes, and some of them were like, shit posts, and some of them were like, helpful things. But when I moved to Instagram, a couple of things happened, and there was so much friction in my creative process. The first thing was, now everything had to be visual, because there's a creative element. You can't just post text. And the second thing is, everything kind of more or less has to be evergreen, because it's going to live on your news feed and people are going to scroll through and find that post. And so now I had these barriers of like, Facebook was easy for me. Now Instagram feels hard. And I was sitting there 2 nights ago, and I was listening to Theo Vaughn and listening to Shane Gillis, these 2 amazing comedians. And I was like, these guys are in the upper echelon of people, like the most known people on the planet, right? Like they would have billions of views between them. They're not sitting down and doing a carousel for Instagram. They're predominantly doing video podcasts. They're the host. They're the one being interviewed. They're on stage. They're shooting videos. And for me, video is like the most natural thing in the world for me to do. I find there's a lot more friction when it comes to like presenting things on Instagram. The point in all of this is that it is not about finding what works for someone else and copying and pasting it for yourself. That's what sounds logically correct. Oh, well, this is working for them. If I want that level of success, I need to do that in the same way. But then you look at like a Joe Rogan. No one could have predicted that 3-hour podcasts would lead to the biggest podcast in the world. It literally makes no logical sense, because apparently no one has time, right? But he just simply went in on what he was most excited to do. The thing that was lighting him up, the thing he was like, well, I don't care if anyone listens. I want to talk to interesting people for really long amounts of time. And it crushed. And so for me, it's that ongoing self-awareness of how am I wired? Where is the fun? Where's the friction that I can avoid? And trusting that as I go all in on that, not neglecting best practices, but integrating them, there's going to be a path that's going to be perfect for me. Because most people build their businesses in such a way that it feels like a prison, because they're built on obligation, not privilege. They're built on a series of I have tos, not I get tos. But the real money and the magic is found in building your life around stuff that you look at in your calendar and you're like excited to do it, as opposed to going, well, carousels are doing really well on Instagram right now, and I hate this process, but I'm going to spend 3 hours designing a carousel. Because that's the kind of crap that I've done in the last 6 months, where I've sat down and I'm like 90 minutes into trying to design something on Canva, right? And then obviously the answer is like, well, why don't we get someone else to do it? And it's like, yeah, but then I have to review that and I have to go through this whole process. Why don't I just gravitate towards the thing that's easiest and most alive for me, which is video? The point in all of this is that that's a micro example and expression of a macro concept, which is the best version of business is one that's built around your passions, your personality, because there is room to grow and there is room for every kind of expression in different business models. There are people who hate being on camera and only want to write. There are people who don't want to write and only want to be on video. There are people who don't want to write or be on video and they only want to be on audio. There's so many ways to do this. The point is like finding our lane, the one that makes us feel most fully alive, because that's the version of you that people are going to be most attractive to. That's the version of you that people are going to be drawn to. There's another great quote, and then I'll hand it back over to you. I think about this quote all the time. There's this old preacher called John Wesley, and he says, light yourself on fire with passion and people will come for miles to watch you burn. And if we're like talking about greatest like client attraction secrets of all time, it's that.
Yeah.
It's like if you can live a life and model a version of existence where you were fully alive and you were actually passionate about what you're doing, that is so deeply attractive because most people do not live in that version of reality. They live out of obligation. They live out of have to's rather than I get to's. And so for me, that's been a huge lesson over the last year is like, how do I just continue to iterate away all of the friction and optimize for the flow?
Yeah, I love that. And it's the journey that I've been on since obviously working with you. And the observation that I've kind of seen is, and actually what I've been through of, and it's a kind of shadow, I suppose, of the creator world, is that we're suddenly given a platform, and we also have, or I had a curse of knowledge where I assumed the things that were easy to me were easy to others. So rooted in that is like, I'm not enough. So I went and found like things that I was learning, and I was translating that to almost prove how clever I was and prove how smart I was, forgetting the things that I was actually living. So a formula I have now is learn it, live it, give it. And I've noticed in the past where I've done things just for the gram. I'm like out walking and I'm like, oh, this, I'll do this for the gram, and you create the scene and you do it for the gram. And I'm like, am I doing this for me? Or am I doing this for Instagram? Like, who am I actually doing this for? So now I've started to just go out for walks with no phone and spend a lot more time in analog, no phone, and just like following what I want to do and like reconnecting to like what lights me up. And now coming back to, I can't remember the book, it was the guy who wrote Still Like an Artist. I don't know if Austin Kleon.
Yeah, Austin Kleon, yeah.
Yeah. And the whole idea of document, don't create. And that's my strategy with content creation now, is just like document the things that I'm already doing. Like not making it up for the gram, because then, as you say, like you create this cage for which you have to then perform to. And I've been there like forgetting like what I've said, and like, what if I just let all of that go and only speak to what I'm living, what's true to me, what makes me feel alive. And yeah, I want to move on a little bit because I'm really curious. Like when I joined your mastermind, one of the most profound insights for me was there is no secret. And this is something you say at the start of many calls, right? The three things: there is no secret, it all works, and no one knows what they're doing.
Right.
The first time you hear that, it's like a little bit destabilizing, right? It's like, well, why am I here? But when that really landed in my body, everything changed for me. Like everything. I started to really trust myself and really like know that I'm enough. And know that someone doesn't have an answer that's different for me. It's my unique expression. It's my soul's note, I suppose, that like is what's going to resonate with people. But I'm really curious as to you, like, has there been any standout moments like that for you in your business that have really shifted things? Because if there's a handful of standout moments, insights for me that have like changed everything, and that for me is one of them, and it's something that I repeat time and time again to my clients, because if they really knew it, they wouldn't look for the next tactic or strategy. They would pick one, they would commit to it, and then in the rest of the time work on themselves. Has there been an insight like that for you?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of them. When I think back to when I first got started, I remember I was going through a Sam Ovens course, and there was one line in there, like for backstory for everyone, I was a youth pastor for 9 years. I finished up in April 16th, 2018. And I was under the belief and the assumption that I was just going to get like a job offer or something like that. And I got a couple of offers for jobs I never wanted to take. But I wasn't expecting to become an entrepreneur. I wasn't the guy doing a lemonade stand at 9 or flipping baseball cards at 12 or whatever. Like I was not interested in that at all. And so April 16th rolls around. I have one more week's worth of pay coming in that Thursday. I have $0 in the bank. When I say zero, I mean it was somewhere between 0 and 100, basically no money. And so I wake up on that Monday and I go, well, no one's hired me. I guess I have to hire myself. And so I get a credit card, and I've been seeing these ads from this guy called Sam Ovens. And my connection to him was so strong because he grew up 2 hours from me. He was also from New Zealand, and he was now kind of living in this high-rise apartment, crushing it, making money online. So I get my credit card, I sign up for his program. And one of the first modules that he said was, in one of the first modules, he said, you have to believe in your ability to figure things out. And when I think back to insights, I mean, obviously there's so many, but I remember that being something that has formed the foundation of all of entrepreneurship for me. Mm-hmm. I think there is an assumption that if we simply buy the right course, read the right book, listen to the right podcast, hire the right mentor, that we will then be we will then enter in on a path that is without obstacles, that's without any challenge, because we're buying their lessons, right? And to some degree, hopefully it reduces it and speeds it up. But there is always going to be challenges, because it doesn't matter whether you are copying and pasting someone else's strategy or whether you are truly trying to figure out what works for you. Mm-hmm. There's going to be moments where you have a lot of self-doubt, where you have self-criticism, where you wonder if you've got what it takes. And that idea of just believing in your ability to figure things out has guided me so well. I remember one of the things that Sam Ovens taught in that program was Facebook ads. And I hadn't gone through that section of the program yet. So I didn't know how to run Facebook ads. And I remember jumping on a call with a prospect, and they were like, I need help with Facebook ads. And I was like, I can 100% help with that. Absolutely, I can. And for me, that wasn't me BSing them, because I knew between my tenacity of like, I'm going to leave no stone unturned to figure out how Facebook ads work, and Sam Ovens modules, like, we're good. And so this person says, yes, I sign them as a client. And then I remember that night, I stay up till 5 a.m. going through all of the Facebook ads training, and then sitting on Google and then trying to figure out all the gaps in between. And I launch the ads, and then I go to sleep for 3 to 4 hours. And then I wake up and they're starting to get leads. And I'm like, I'm a genius. It's working, right? And then, of course, like, the campaign doesn't keep working. I need to go back in and figure out what's not working. But that belief of believing in my ability to figure it out has been a cornerstone, because every time we believe we can't figure it out, we give our power away to someone else. And we've seen this obviously with election season, where it doesn't matter whether people consider themselves now on the other side of it, on the winning side or the losing side. People have a tendency to believe someone is coming to rescue them. Now, of course, someone institutes a higher tax or a lower tax, it's going to have a real effect on people. But regardless of what happens, you still have to have this sense of self-responsibility and self-ownership and self-lead your life to the point where you still believe that you can figure it out regardless of the landscape. And for me, this has been such a core belief that's guided not just business, but all of my life, where I grew up with a single parent household. Both of my older siblings were drug dealers, in and out of jail. My brother to this day is the leader of the biggest gang in our city. And so there has been so many times where I'm like breaking away from the pattern of what I knew and what seemed to be the path for me, where I was going to go down that similar trajectory. But I had to believe in my ability to figure it out. I had to surround myself with the right people. I had to make different decisions. I had to give myself new information. But no one was going to make those decisions for me. No one was going to come and rescue me from that. And I think the temptation in business especially is, well, if I just hire the right coach, they're going to be responsible for me. And therefore, I don't have to believe my ability to figure things out. I'm going to believe in their ability to figure things out. And that's the friction for most people, is they're giving the responsibility for their life, their results, to someone else. And of course, no one's going to care as much about your life as you do. No one's going to care about this. You know, it's why most entrepreneurs, not most, many end up in business partnerships that make no business sense. right? There's a sense of like, well, if we just split the responsibility here, like, it means that like we're both going to share the challenges. And I get on these calls with these people that are in business partnerships, and they're like friends that have the same skill sets and the same like passions and the same, and it makes no strategic sense whatsoever. But it's that like loneliness epidemic of like, I'd rather do this with someone else than do it by myself. Because that way we have the shared responsibility and the shared blame and the shared credit. And I think in actuality, it's just a really challenging but empowering belief that life is a single player game. Doesn't mean people don't care about you. It doesn't mean you're not going to find amazing people who are going to cheer you on and support you and mentor you and coach you and be in your corner and on your side. But no one's going to care more about your life than you do. So you have to believe in your ability to figure things out more than anything else and more than anyone else's ability.
Yeah,
does that resonate?
It makes perfect sense. I think the resourcefulness is like one of the most underrated. But for me, the language I use is I trust my future self implicitly. So I create situations for my future self that are way beyond my current self, but I trust his ability to figure out and his resourcefulness. It's similar to what we're talking here. And actually something comes through me like I suppose the dark side of coaching, right? Where a lot of coaches get into coaching because, we're natural healers or, we want to help people. And then we have this dynamic where there's a sort of guru-student dynamic where it's like, oh, you can fix me and, you can make me better. And then that feeds their not enoughness wound, the wound around the sort of the fixer or what have you.
Right.
And I think there's a really there is a real danger in the coaching space and I've experienced it personally, where actually by going in and meddling and not teaching personal responsibility, you're actually I was taking away their power. And it was a pattern that I spotted in myself. And I think something I went through is, and I think every coach has to go through, of being okay with their clients failing. And actually, let's just talk about that for a moment, because, I've had these moments where, my clients haven't got results and they've perhaps, reached out and asked for a refund or complained or what have you. And I had a belief that I was alone in that. And I remember messaging you, or it was on some call, and he was like, and you go, mate, I know Alex Hormozy, some clients of Alex Hormozy's don't get results. And I was like, oh, it's not just me. And I think that was a really, really powerful shift for me, where I just assumed like there's something wrong with me. I'm not a good enough coach. I need to, but actually knowing that every coach has clients that fail. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, there was a huge unlock for me when I was listening to a lady called Brooke Castillo a few years ago. And for anyone who doesn't know, Brooke Castillo is like a titan in the coaching industry, one of the top, if not the top life coach in the world. I think in 2023, I don't know what her 2024 numbers will be, but in 2023, she did like 52 million. And she teaches people how to become life coaches, and she does life coaching herself. And she said something that, like, when she said it initially, I rejected it. I was like, no, that's not true. And then I sat with it and I was like, damn, she's totally right. She said, you have no idea what your clients should do, but you just think you know, but only they know what they're supposed to do. And that was a really like big head scratcher for me, because I was like, well, if someone's not making money and I've made money and I say like, this is the best way to do it, I clearly know something that they don't. But what she was saying was like, you don't know the journey that someone's on. And if we were to remove all of the mistakes from your past or my past, we wouldn't be the person we are. You could say that there's really no mistakes, there's only lessons. And if you cause people to, or try and control to where there's no obstacles that they face, there's no strength that's developed. And so, of course, we don't set people up for failure. But where the permission came to me was, I don't know someone's path so much so that I can see whether or not this is a good thing or a helpful thing for them, like a bad thing or a helpful thing, whether it's whether them, even like if we just get real, it's like someone is thinking about working with us and then they go with another coach. Well, you might think that's the dumbest thing ever, right? Oh, I know that person, they suck, they're unethical, da, da, da. You don't know what lesson that path holds for them. You think you know, and it's like the lesson is you're going to come back in 6 weeks and say, I should have worked with Joel, right? We just don't know. And so when you take yourself out of God tier of like, I'm omnipotent. I know what you're supposed to do. And you go, I'm just here to be a guide. And my advice is either going to help you towards what I'm suggesting and yet resonates with you. And so you take that decision, or you're going to go on a completely different path. Everything is perfect. Like one of the greatest gifts you can give people is the consequences of their own decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have taken so much peace, and everything internally for me has become so much more calm when I've realized my job is not to control anyone, not to determine anyone's path. I'm not there to guarantee success, right? Very common one in the coaching space. I'm going to guarantee you're going to make a ton of money, or I'll work with you for free, blah, blah, blah. Nothing is guaranteed. And so the freedom that I felt when I embraced this idea of like, not only can I not control it, but actually like their journey is none of my business.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that in the sense of like, I cannot be emotionally invested in whether they do well or not. I can be emotionally invested in them as a person. I can want the best for them. I can cheer them on. I can be in their corner and on their side, but I cannot allow my emotions to dictate my advice, or their decisions to dictate my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And when I detach from that and I'm like, my job is just to do the best I can and show up in the best way I know how. And their job is to take responsibility of their life and to accept my advice, to reject my advice, to say they're going to do the work and then they don't do the work, or to do the work and it doesn't work. All of that is perfect because it all allows us to go on the unique journey to learn the lessons that we desperately need. And I think the more you can become detached from your client's success, the more their challenges or their failures won't affect you. It doesn't mean you don't care. There's a deep sense of caring in what we do, but there's no attachment, right? Their success doesn't mean that I'm successful, because there's a Derek Sivers quote where he says like, if information was all we needed, we'd all be billionaires with six-pack abs, right? And so we know that there are so many variables to like coaching someone. Like strategy is the tiniest piece. We can give everyone the same strategy. We can do our part. And then people will get varying degrees of success because they have beliefs, they have emotions, they have a whole journey of self-mastery they need to go on. There's the variable of skill. You can say, hey, post this, do this, create a mini VSL. Here's how to sell in the DMs, blah, blah, blah. The variable is skill. And so there are so many pieces to the puzzle you cannot control. And so therefore, do not try to control what you have no influence over. Only control what you actually can control. And that's really the key to, I think, being like emotionally stable and being like a dependable leader, is not allowing like someone signing on or not signing on, or staying with you or not staying with you, or getting results or not getting results to cause you to kind of do this roller coaster.
Yeah, I love that. The sweet spot I've come to is I care, but I don't mind. And it's that like that sweet spot of like, I deeply care, but I don't mind if you fail. And we have to have that detachment. Otherwise, like I've been there where I masked my wound around the healer that's in me with over delivering. It's like, it's a strategy, over deliver, especially after reading, the $100 million offers, right? It's like over deliver, over promise. Like I will go to the nth degree to get you results. But I was exhausted, like exhausted. That sweet spot has freed me up so much.
There was actually a really cool line. I'll just share this real quick. Taki Moore, one of my original mentors and just one of my best friends, said, we're not responsible for our clients, we're responsible to our clients. And that, again, is the same essence, but said in a better way. That really freed me to go, okay, I'm not responsible for people. People are responsible for themselves. The more I positioned my marketing, my sales, my offer for people who already knew that they are responsible for their journeys, the better results people got inside working with me, but the better people I attracted through, client acquisition. And so I think there's something to be said about having the right frame. It's not just about being able to control your emotions and not having the highs and lows. That's a big part of it. It's actually creating a right relationship. It's not allowing yourself to believe that success looks like manipulation, right? Oh, I can see you're about to do a misstep. You're making a big mistake. Don't do it. Listen to me. I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. Ignore everyone else. Do what I'm telling you, because you don't know what people should do. You don't know what the right path is. Your job is to be responsible to your clients, not responsible for your clients.
Excuse me for interrupting the show, but I wanted to ask you, have you subscribed yet? I ask because this is a brand new podcast and it will really help me out in my mission to spread coaching as far and wide as possible. I truly believe that coaching can change the world, and your simple subscription helps me out more than you realize. So thank you for your help in advance. And if you feel like this episode might help a friend out or another coach, then go ahead and share it. Thanks in advance, and let's get back into the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Something I've been playing recently with, like almost jokingly in my group calls, is giving them the least amount of direction.
Right.
Like you sometimes feel it where clients are coming to you like, give me the strategy, give me the systems. And like, yes, that's needed. But like, have you just tried to go and do it? Like, I remember when my first year as a coach, all I did was just pick up my phone and voice note people and call people and do Instagram stories and go live. Like, I was just figuring it out on my own. And I grew to six figures in my very first year, like with zero experience. And sometimes actually just the minimum experience, minimum steer of just like, go and book calls, like go and book 5 calls. Or if a gun was to your head and you had to book 5 calls tomorrow, what would you do?
Yeah.
And like sometimes just actually the minimum instructions is a really powerful way I've experienced.
Well, I was watching this guy on YouTube yesterday. His YouTube channel is so interesting. I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's something like Dry Creek Wrangler School. You might have seen this guy. He has a huge beard and his videos get millions of views. And he just sits there and he's smoking a cigar in like the country somewhere. And he is like just sharing life advice in a very like, this is what's worked for me. It might not work for you. And so I watched one of his videos yesterday for the first time. I'd seen him pop up forever. I watched one of these videos. And the first part of the video, he was addressing the fact that he gets countless emails every day asking for advice. And he was saying like, I do read them all. Even if you don't get a reply from me, I do read them. And he said something so obvious, but it really struck me, where he's like, the reason I don't reply is because there is so much context I don't understand. You're giving me a few sentences on a page. I could give you terrible advice because I don't know all of that. I'm not a therapist. I'm not qualified to give you advice at the level that you need. And so I read them and I appreciate them. And he even said, he's like, and I pray over them, but I don't reply because I'm not that guy. I can't be that guy to you. I know too little. And I think most coaches would really benefit from the reminder that you're always only seeing the tip of the iceberg. And so when you take a step back and you're presented on a group call or one-to-one with a client challenge, your job is to uncover more of the iceberg underneath the surface. And we often get a question, even halfway through, we think we already know the answer. We're listening to respond. Like someone's like, oh, I'm struggling with this and my content's not working. And we're right into coaching mode, teaching people stuff. But when you take a step back and you really just try to uncover what maybe isn't seen below the surface level, you're in a much better position to give people good advice. And it's like a 2 steps back where you feel like, I'm asking questions and I feel like I already know, but I want to just be really clear. It's a very powerful lens to look at coaching through. It's very uncomfortable for most of us because we just think we know everything. Last week I had the best one-to-one session I've ever had with a client. And I'm like thousands of hours deep into coaching. And I think my question to talking ratio was like 90% questions, 10% talking. And it was very uncomfortable for me because this person came with a business problem, right? It was, I want, let's figure out the model and the offer. And I just dove deeper and deeper and deeper until we realized that actually there was a pattern that from their childhood and their relationship with their parents and how it's showing up with their business partnership, that there was a pattern of self-neglect that they had come into every relationship they've ever had asking themselves, who do I need to be in this relationship for this relationship to work? And so what they had never really become clear on is, what do I want? And what is this business here to do? And it sounds so simple, but it became one of the most deeply emotional calls I've ever been on. It's incredibly powerful because I didn't just take the BS that I heard at the start of the call. Not BS, it's real for people, but just take the surface level business stuff. Oh yeah, you need an offer. Let's talk about the offer. This is the price. This is what it should be. I chose to dive deeper. And I think that's a skill I'm continuing to learn and reminding myself of, like, I don't have enough context right now. So I'm either going to give terrible advice or I'm going to give no advice at all until I fully understand. And I think that's a really underrated coaching skill that I know personally the best coaches in the world employ. I'll share one quick anecdote. I hope this is okay. I know I'm like, we're good friends, so I'm kind of like running away ranting. I met Brendan Bouchard a few weeks ago, and Brendan Bouchard, if anyone doesn't know, has been in the game since like 2007. And he's been at 8 figures, I think, since then or thereabouts. So he was one of the first people I ever discovered online. It was like 2009, 2010. I came across some YouTube videos, how to make $1 million a year as an expert. So I remember like supposed to be working, but I'm instead watching this YouTube video, taking notes. And I had the chance to meet him a few weeks ago. We were at the same event. And I have this conversation. He's I think he's the top paid high performance coach in the world. And it was very interesting seeing someone at the top of their game asking people questions all the time. Like, not just understanding their situation, but literally, like, they would ask him a question, he would answer, but then he would respond with a question. So they'd be like, what are you planning to do with this business? Like, what's your strategy? And he'd go, this is what we're thinking about doing right now. But what do you think? Like, do you think there's anything I'm missing? And I'm sitting there going, like, here's the guy who is the dude in the room that everyone pays to have the strategy and know the stuff. And he has enough humility to go, I might not have all the information. I might not know the best strategy. The best strategy might come out with a random conversation with this person at the table. And so the humility it takes to not just talk, but to listen and to ask the right questions is something that I found to be true of all of the best coaches and consultants in the world. And it is not second nature for most of us. It is a learned skill that we have to prioritize, because that, when you develop that, you become highly impactful, right? If everyone just needed more information, you could just send them to a podcast, but people need transformation. They need to uncover, like, why are they actually being held back? And I think that's why it's so important to change the frame of, I'm just teaching you, I know what's best, to maybe I don't know what's best. And my job here is to guide you towards the thing that you feel is intuitively true and right for you.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, again, it's like a dark side of this Instagram world we live in where we have to present ourselves to the world as someone who knows it all or has our shit figured out because we want to build influence and what have you. But actually, it's the humility. Like, it's something I've also noticed in high performance is just the humility and the thirst, the beginner's mindset. And it's a real sort of Zen mindset of, like, constantly. I met a samurai this summer, and he said something really interesting to me. He goes, I always stop training when I'm 60% satisfied. So he's like the reverse of the 10,000 hour rule. He's like, for example, if I do a swipe with my sword, he didn't call it a swipe with his sword, but you get what I'm saying. If he does a swipe for a sword and that day it was perfect, he will stop and walk away. And he won't, like, that was it, that was it, that was it, that was it. And he'll repeat it. He'll be like, I felt it. I want to try and feel that again tomorrow. So he's constantly living on that edge of that humility and that beginner's mindset. It kind of feels aligned. There's something that I'm really curious. So I feel one thing I've noticed in myself is, like, the thing that I teach is the thing that I need to hear the most. And I'll give you some context. So I'm interested, like, what that is for you. So one thing I repeat to my clients is that even if you didn't buy another course for the rest of your life, you're sitting on a multi-six-figure business. Like, my clients are newer in their journey, sort of, up to 10 grand, back to 1, 2, 3. They're sort of, the goal is to get consistent 10 to 20k months. And a pattern of theirs is jump distraction, is a pattern of mine and is still a pattern of mine. So that's one thing I say to them. And last month for me, since being in this mastermind of yours, like, I had a record month, had a 50k month, and my pattern was like, what can I go and spend this on? what do I need to go and learn?
I need
And
I
I
need 3 new cameras and a new
literally,
micro, you know.
and I need to go and do a call, like a deep dive on messaging, like just self-sabotage, right? And I was speaking to my other coach and telling him what I say to my clients of, you're all sitting on a multi-six-figure business. And he said to me, Joel, if you didn't learn one thing for the rest of your life, one more thing for the rest of your life, you're sitting on a multi-seven-figure business. And it was just this like, fuck, I'm teaching the thing that I most need to hear myself. And it's landed so deeply in me. And I've really paused like all learning and I'm just in execution mode and doubling down on what works and doubling down on me. And it's really shifted me. But I'm curious with you, like, what's the thing that you find yourself teaching that you also need to hear from yourself?
I mean, there's probably a lot. Like a few things that come to mind. I was sitting with one of our mutual friends, Dan Harrison, last night, and he was flying through Vancouver to head and run his retreat in Mexico. And so I head out to the hotel, the airport hotel, and we hang out. And I can't remember the exact way that he phrased this, but he asked something like, he was like, that best version of you, that highest version of you, your future self, what is that person like? What would that person do in your business right now? Or something like that. Or how does that person think? Who is that person? And I was like, yeah, I've touched that person a few times. Like I've had those moments of clarity, breath work, plant medicine, whatever it might be, where you're like, I can see it all. I can feel it. Like, this is great. This is who I am. And it always comes back to simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
It's always like, oh, this is so much more like it's simpler than I'm making it. And that's really easy to see when clients are like overcomplicating this thing. You're like, dude, why do you have a low ticket, a high ticket, a membership, LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. It can be simpler than this. And this year, I launched a low ticket community, and I knew it was a terrible idea, but it was coming back to the very first question you asked around asking for help. And I shared about that pattern of self-neglect. I genuinely was like so deeply motivated to help people. I was like, there's so many people I can't help with my core offer. I'm going to create a low ticket community. Now, if anyone's been in my community for any amount of time, I tell everyone to not do a low ticket membership. Like they're just terrible on the metric side, very hard to make good money. You attract the wrong people, retention, churn, blah, blah, blah. But I did it anyway, right? And it was really interesting because I think the thing I need to hear the most is like, I'm the most important person in the business. And if it doesn't work for me, it doesn't work for the business. But I always forget that. Like, it's really easy for me to see I'm working with a client right now who's at multiple seven figures. And this is a really common occurrence. People come in with really big teams and maybe they overhired or their business had shrunk a little bit, but they've still got the same team. So their margins are non-existent. And the thing I coach them through is always like, you can't build your business around this team because this team and this business is here to serve you. So if it's not working for you, you have to have hard conversations and make hard decisions about letting people go. It's always so much easier to see in other people. And then for me, I've made the same mistakes plenty of times where I'm like, oh, I need to do this because it will help more people, even though I don't want to do it. Or like, I'll hire this person because I need to do content, not because I want to do content in that way. And I think coming back to this idea of like designing your business to fit around your life, not your life to fit around your business. That's my core message. That's why people pay me and they stay and they fly across the world to be in rooms, is because that's my philosophy and that resonates with them. But that's the thing I need to be most reminded of all the time. It's like, there's nothing I have to do. So what are the things that I really, truly want to do? And the more I get caught up in that obligation, the worse business becomes. It might make more money, but I'll be more miserable in the process. And in many cases, it won't even make more money, right? What was funny is I launched that low ticket membership and I had like a much higher month, and then kind of everything balanced out because now my focus was like split. And so my revenue was the same as when I was making when I just had one offer and one high ticket community. So I think that's the advice that I need to continue to remind myself of, is everything is much simpler than we make it to be. And to stop overcomplicating it. It's really simple. If you want to shoot videos, shoot videos. If you want to do carousels, but you don't have to do a bunch of stuff you don't want to do. And the second thing is like, this business is here to serve me. I'm not here to serve it. And so if it's not working for me, it's not working.
Mhm.
And I think it's very easy to give that advice. You can see it so clear, like clearly and plainly with other people. But for
Mhm.
me, I can look at business and go, dude, how am I back in this situation where I'm like
Mhm.
taking a call I don't want to take, do anything I don't want to do? And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it's a big lesson I'm always relearning.
Yeah, I love that. Really quickly before I just want to finish off with a quick fire. Have you ever had moments in that where you've like doubted yourself? Like it's this crazy thing, right? As I say, like we teach the thing we most need to hear, and sometimes I'm teaching or helping my clients with the very thing that I'm struggling the most with, right?
Mm,
Because our
yeah.
passion comes from our suffering. Like passion literally means to suffer,
Yeah.
and our passions come from the struggle, the things that we've struggled through. So it's this funny relationship sometimes where I'm like, I'm helping clients with a thing that I'm struggling with myself.
Mhm.
Do you ever have you ever had those moments of like really doubting yourself and like yeah, almost had that imposter syndrome? I don't like that word, but yeah.
No, no, I get it. So it's funny because I wouldn't resonate with the phrase doubting myself, but I'd
Mhm.
resonate with the phrase not trusting myself.
Yeah, yeah,
And maybe they're the
yes,
same
yes.
thing,
Yeah,
but like
totally.
I wrote down, so flashing back to April 2018, I'm starting this business. I'm literally like Googling and searching around best online business model, right? Like I'm like, okay, what's the best way to make $1 million a year? And at that time, like agencies were exploding. And so like that was my first kind of offer as I was doing everything for everyone. And I remember having this moment of clarity in around April, May 2018. So that is a long time ago, right? Like relatively speaking. And I'm sitting there and I literally write down, I don't want to build a 7-figure agency. I just want to create content, shoot videos, coach clients. And I basically described the version of business I'm living now. But in April and May of 2018, I ignored that and literally built a 7-figure agency over the next 18 months. And I can point to many times where, whether it is lack of confidence that it's going to work, whether it is making the voices of mentors or kind of gurus, people I look up to, too loud
Mhm.
in my life, there has always been a pattern of like trying to create the version of success that other people will think is amazing. Like I remember being in a mastermind years ago, and when you're sometimes in mastermind, you introduce yourself, you talk about how much money you're making. And this one did that when intro, like we're at 1 million a year. But the second thing they would say is how big their team was,
Mm.
right? So there was this ego in the room of like, no one was talking profit margins or how happy are you or how much stress you're living with. It was like, my name's Dan, and that was the terrible accent, but like, you maybe guess where I was in the world. My name's Dan, and I'm doing 1 million a year, and I have a team of 15. And everyone's like, and so when I went from, I had a team of 13, that was my peak, and then went to a team of 4, and then it's like me and a VA now. There's a part where it's like it looks way less cool. Like,
Mhm.
like there was a perception that I was trying to live up to where I felt really important. I felt like, especially in 2021, where the team was the biggest, I got multiple awards that year. I worked with Alex Hormozi one-to-one. I was featured in Sam Oven's webinar. And so it was like, Dan's in New Zealand. He's making waves and he's got a
Mhm.
team and he's like managing sales, sitters and closers and da-da-da. And it was just like realizing I was living someone else's version of success. And it wasn't entirely conscious. I didn't
Mhm.
sit down and go, I'm just trying to make Alex Hormozi proud or Sam Ovens
Mhm.
proud or whatever it is. But there was a sense where I was like, there's somewhere in here I'm not trusting myself that the thing I wrote down in 2018 is the thing that A, I actually want, and B, will actually work for me.
Mhm.
And so I think the more that I create a speed and a pace in my life where there's not a lot of margin or a lot of stillness or a lot of silence, I can get really off track.
Yeah.
The secret for me, I think the secret for all of us is allowing ourselves to get quiet and still and slow and just make sure that in that stillness, the thing that we feel deepest within us is actually a reflection of the life that we're living right now. And the bigger the gap, the more incongruence, the more pain.
Mhm.
And so all I've been trying to do over the last few years is like when I slow down and the still small voice in me like is leading me in a direction, that I want to make sure that it's a mirror image of what I'm doing, that I'm not living in a state of numbing where I'm like, I have this gnawing feeling, I shouldn't be doing this. Let's forget that. Let's make more money, right? I've been just really trying to become sensitive to that. Okay, where am I off? Where am I not doing the things I know I deeply want to do? Where am I doing things that I freaking hate because I'm telling myself that that's how you make money online because so-and-so said that everything's supposed to be boring work, right? So I think like I've noticed that pattern so much in myself because I would say the biggest thing I'm always trying to communicate to people is trust your gut. Someone says like, should I keep working with you or not? Like I'm coming out to the end of my time and I'm just trying to figure out, my answer is always like, trust your gut. Like, what do you think? Right? When someone's thinking about working with me, it's the same idea. And that's the advice I need to hear the most. Dude, trust your gut. You know what to do. Like, and if you don't, get still, go for a walk. Like, you know, you've got like, you know, what did you say at the start of this? Without taking another course, you know, you've got a multiple 7-figure version. The next level is already in me. I don't need a ton of guidance, right? But there is a temptation to believe that like when you get still, there's nothing there, or the answers that you get are frightening and scary, and they're going to ask you to change and tweak and optimize in a way that feels uncomfortable. So it's much easier to go through the proven path that someone else has laid out.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing I always come back to is like, but I'm here to create Dan Bolton's version of business. I'm here to create an offer that no one else has, not to be unique, but because it's a reflection of who I am. And the more I venture on that, the less it's a trodden path that has a cheat sheet and a blueprint that I can simply copy.
Yeah.
And so I think the temptation is to not create something unique, to not be a real voice, but to be an echo, because at least when it doesn't work, you can blame someone else.
Yeah.
Rather than having to truly trust yourself and be led by your intuition.
Yeah, I love that. And I've had so much permission this last year since working with you to really step into that. And the thing that I'm optimizing for above anything, and I'm really like all in on it, is my life and optimizing for flow. And it's interesting, my 2 record months this year have been when I've been working the least. Like I had absolutely
so annoying, right?
No, I know. And it goes against all of my conditioning. Like every cell of my being is like, the funny thing is, right, record month in October, immediately I'm like wanting to do more and like wanting to scrap my whole calendar because I haven't been working hard enough and I should have grown quicker. It's like, mate, are you joking? Like the lesson is, it's all there. And like the thing that I've been sitting with personally is like, I'm not going to optimize for growth. I'm going to optimize for ease, because whatever's easy, fun, and like flow and enjoyable will bring the best version of me out. I will be more magnetic. I will be more succinct, more clear in my voice, and more vibrant, more energetic, more enrollment, more inspiring. And I'm really on that path, fully trusting it. And it's just, it goes against so much of my conditioning, but it's true.
Well, I think the thing that I'll finish with is what we're talking about here is not just unique to entrepreneurship. We've been conditioned to listen to other people our entire lives. We go into a school system where there is always a right answer. It's not subjective, it's objective. It's like, this is how the world works. This is what you should do. If you want to get a great job, you get good grades, you go to university, and the path of intuition and self-leadership is, especially in the West, not a common path that most of us take. So it's deeply against our conditioning, not just as entrepreneurs who are obsessed with finding blueprints and hacks and one funnel away. It is this idea that someone else always knows what's best for us. It's why many people live in the shadow of their parents' aspirations for them. Even if we never live up to them, it's because we believe that there are just people that know better. And one of the most challenging pieces is, whether it's religion and education and family and marriage, whatever it might be, is this idea of loving people and serving people and listening to people and being humble, and also being self-confident and trusting yourself. And those are tensions. It's not like you ignore everything that's come before you and you go, I know this person says this is how you do copywriting, but I'm going to reinvent the wheel. No, we take what works. We absorb what we see to be true in our industries and in our life, but then we have to apply it to us. And every person we've ever admired throughout history was a little bit weird, unique. They forged their own path. They did their own stuff. Like when you dive into the lives of Einstein and Michelangelo and Van Gogh and Nikola Tesla, like they are weird people. And I think you only get to that place of your greatest contribution to humanity when you embrace that part of you that is different, that marches to a different beat, that thinks a little bit differently. And it's not trying to be unique snowflake for the sake of it. It's understanding that we are in fact unique, all have different resonances and frequencies. And the more we ignore that, the less we serve humanity and the more we create pain and frustration for ourselves. But the more we listen to it, the more we find our sweet spot in this universe, the more we find our tribe, our people, we find that path of greatest contribution. It's just terrifying because it goes against everything we've been told and raised to believe. And that is what escaping the matrix is. It's the self-imposed matrix that we are supposed to walk and talk and act and be in a certain way. And escaping the matrix is simply the path of modern autonomy and total self-sovereignty, which is to become a powerful person who listens to their intuition, who is self-led, who's blazing their own trail, and who is figuring out what they came here to do in the first place.
Totally. Love that. I want to just finish really quickly with some quick fire questions, so like one or two words.
Let's go.
What's one book every coach should read?
I love how this is the quietest I've been all call because I have so many. I'll share if it's okay. I'll share just a few that have been deeply helpful for me because they range. I think the challenge is like there's probably no one book for anyone. Man's Search for Meaning was deeply powerful for me along the lines of everything I just shared in the last couple of minutes around living the life that only you can live. That was a really powerful book. Another one called Psycho-Cybernetics was deeply impactful for me when it comes to your self-image, rewiring your brain for success. From a marketing perspective, two books really stand out. I'd say three. Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson, Breakthrough Advertising, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. Those are all really good. The thing that I'll just end with, I know this is not the question, but I'll succinctly give my belief is that the next book you need to read will come and find you. I don't think we have to seek out our next steps. I think when we become open and we go, universe, I'm here to grow, show me my blind spots, or I want to dive deeper on this. I don't think we have to go to page 37 of Google results to find what we're looking for. I have a deep trust in the synchronicities of life. That whatever I need is going to come to my path in the right times. I've had books recommended to me 10 times and I never took it seriously. And then there was one time it came up a year, 2, 3 later, and then I read it and I'm like, why didn't I read this book sooner? But it's because I wasn't ready for it. And it was in that moment that book was, I was ready for that book was ready for me. And so I think like sometimes the best thing we can do is not read and not do anything until there is an obvious book or path or resource screaming our name.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me, is it a Buddhist quote of when the student is ready, the teacher will appear? Kind of.
Yeah.
Feels...
I think that's how all of life works. I truly do. I think when we live surrendered, trusting lives, everything you need comes across your path.
Yeah, I love it. Second to last question. If you could broadcast one message to all coaches in the world, what would it be?
Man, one message. Clearly being succinct is not my forte. I would say be here now. I think there's such a temptation as entrepreneurs to live in the future or live in the past and to not live in the only thing that exists, which is the present moment. And I just think if people could just trust that the right things, the right clients, the right lessons are going to come across at the right time, and we don't need to be constantly projecting into what next month needs to look like and next quarter and how much we're going to make in the next 6 months and the client goals and just simply like be here now. I think the world will be a better place and people will probably make a lot more money.
People will love that. Finally, what's your favorite coaching question? If you had to pick one.
This is like the essence of our whole conversation is like, but what do you think you should do?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I've done my little little rant on like, if I was you, this is what I would do. I think my favorite one was like, but then what do you feel like you should do? Or what do you feel like your gut is telling you?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that sounds so trite and it's like very in theme with like the whole theme of the conversation, which is I'm always interested for people to put into their words what they're feeling on the back of whatever advice I've given or whatever's going on in their business. Is like when people present to me like, oh my gosh, everything's on fire. Like I'll just go like, well, what do you think you should do? Or what do you feel like the bottleneck is? Before I give advice and before I kind of tell them, I just defer to them. And sometimes the irony is people will pay you a lot of money to help you facilitate them coaching themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You just simply ask questions and you're like, what do you think you should do? And they're like, I think I should do this. And you're like, that's great. And they're like, oh my gosh, this call was amazing. Thank you so much. And sometimes all people are looking for is permission.
Totally. Yeah. Love that. Beautiful. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thanks so much for all of who you are, Dan. I really, really appreciate you.
It's been great. Thank you so much for creating the space and taking the time, man.
Come on. Love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, go ahead and share it with a friend, a coach, or anyone that you feel could benefit. It helps them out. It helps me out. I think it's just a kind thing to do. And if you haven't, make sure you're subscribed. I'm just getting started with this podcast. I've got so many amazing episodes, so much value, so many guests planned. It's really my goal to make this the one place you want to come to for all things coaching and the business of coaching. And come say hi. Send me a message on Instagram. I don't bite hard. I don't bite. I am friendly, and I'd love to meet you and answer any questions that you have and just have a good conversation. And would love to hear your thoughts on today's episodes too. Anyway, I will see you around, sending you so much love, and have a beautiful rest of your day.